Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. As always, we have another amazing guest for you this week, and I'm so excited to have him on that I just want to jump right in and introduce him. He is somebody that I've known for a very long time, for 20 years or so, actually. He is a former professional football player in the Canadian Football League, having played for Montreal, Hamilton, and British Columbia. He is I think somebody we can learn a lot from, breaking into fashion and entrepreneurialism. And I think a really awesome accomplishment. First person in his family to graduate with his college degree. Without further ado, I want to welcome my friend and former teammate, Brandon Rutley, to the show. How are you today, B?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Happy to be here. Appreciate that introduction too, Stu. Very nice. Very well done, man.
I got to kick it over to you with the first questions. So many people dream of playing professional sports, and obviously, your career took you to the Canadian Football League, but you enjoyed a lengthy career,
Mhm.
about a decade or so. What was that experience like for you, and what were some of the biggest lessons you learned along the way?
I think the first thing I actually realized was I was so many lessons were thrown at me, right? Obviously, we went to school together, right? And so
Mhm,
football for me was just, it was my identity. It was a part of who I was. It was, eat, slept, and breathe football. You know what I mean?
mhm.
It's just my thing at the time. And leaving from high school and going to college, I had 1 year off from the field. That was my first time since 8 years old having a break.
Mm.
And I don't know if that was necessarily good for me. That was the first lesson that I learned. Football brought a lot of discipline into my life, a lot of structure, a lot of order. And here I am, a college student thrown into this atmosphere with new people, a new environment, no schedule, no nothing. And I loved it, but it also took away from some of the discipline that I kind of grew up, or that we actually grew up, experiencing between, football, basketball, baseball, track, whatever the case may be. Right. And, going through that experience and then hoping to get into the NFL. Right. I think that break for me was the first lesson because I lost my discipline. And then it was very difficult for me at a young age when I was changing and developing to grasp the discipline that I needed to get to the next level. I always knew I was a good football player, right? I'm like, this come natural to me. But the difference is when you start getting to college and to a higher level, there's other folks that's also good, but they're also training. They're also
Mhm.
changing their bodies, right? Changing their mindset. And that's such a huge part of the transition from high school to college and from college to pros. And luckily I was able to get an opportunity in the CFL. And for me, the biggest lesson was creating something that's sustainable, right? Creating something that I can last in, right? I had my little stints in the NFL and it just wasn't working. And for me at that point, if that didn't work, I failed. And so one of the reasons I stayed in the CFL for so long, and it wasn't easy, but I wanted to sustain a career, a long career, and I wanted to do it until I was ready to be done. And so that was part of that process for me was, understanding the value of hard work, understanding patience, and being able to endure, trials and tribulations. And that's what lasted to a 10-year career before I
Mhm.
transitioned. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to acknowledge you because I think the stat is like the average professional football career only lasts 2.5, 3 years these days, just because of the injuries and the somebody always coming to
Yeah.
take your spot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you feel like was the single biggest lesson you learned in terms of needing to up the level of effort, determination, to your point, structure, as you were making that transition to playing in a different country?
Um, Football is pretty much the same everywhere, but I know it doesn't matter how talented you are. I think that separation is so different now, right? That separation of talents, the gap is not as big as it used to be, right? So you can be as talented as you want to, but it's a numbers game. If I already have two running backs, Red, I can't keep you. We have to cut you, right?
Mhm.
That was like you're gonna cut me of all people, right? That's a shock, right? Especially when you've been praised. You remember how Martinez was. I was highly praised for my football abilities,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that was something that I was also very used to experiencing. And so the first time I was cut, I was like, dang, I was cut probably 4 or 5 times when I started with Montreal, and it was a humbling experience. And so I knew in order to sustain a career and actually be there, there was something I had to do to make myself different from everyone else. So, I wasn't the starter at the time. So the only way that I would get reps in pros was by standing 15 yards behind not only the starter, but the backup to the starter. And I would shadow every single play throughout the practice. Right.
Wow.
So it got to a point where that was my thing. I would stand in the huddle, listen to the play, break, and I would run to my position just as I would if I was starting. But I'll be like 15, 20 yards back. And I would run the play, go through the motion, full speed. So I'm drenched just like the starters are. And I did that every day in practice for that entire season. Never played once. And then in fact, I was released toward the end of the season, and I was sent home. And so I was actually in Washington, D.C. at the time with my wife, and I was watching the game at home, and I saw that both running backs got injured. And I got a phone call right after the game. They said, "Hey, Rhett, this is the first playoff game of the season. Both guys are injured. You're starting next week." And and so I was already ready. I've already prepared. I had been practicing and preparing my body and my mind, and I was just so ready for this opportunity. I knew I had to seize this moment, because if I didn't, that would be the end of my career. I knew that.
Yeah.
And that was probably the most ready I was in my life for the biggest challenge at my life to that point. And I had a great game, 100 yards, touchdown. And after that, I was in the league for, at least I was in Montreal for 6 more years, and I was able to establish myself as one of the premier players in the league at the time. And it's those moments that I feel like we all have, those moments of impact, that we either show up or we let things fall wayside, and those are regrets that we have to deal with, or things that we essentially have to get over eventually.
Yeah, dude, that's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that. And for the listeners, I hope you guys are hearing what Brandon's sharing about basically showing up like you are the starter on the team, like you are the one with the team on your back. And I heard you say that you're putting in the effort and the intensity as if you were
Yeah,
the everyday back well before you were. And
yeah,
then when you actually finally got your number called, you were able to go in the game and show up and show out for the
yeah,
team.
yeah.
And I'm just curious. I'm sure that you've had dozens and dozens of coaches in your playing career. Who stands out to you as somebody that instilled work ethic in you, or maybe taught you a lesson that you continue to use today?
Mm, I have quite a few coaches. I think the very first person I'll mention is Brent Brennan. He actually just accepted the head coaching job for Arizona, for ASU. He was someone who was always full of excitement, full of energy, and I actually met him my sophomore year at Alhambra. I went to San Jose State for a camp, and he just had this
Mhm.
amazing energy. And he didn't care about what position I played. I was out there running routes as a receiver, slot back, and he knew I was a running back, but he didn't care. He was just so encouraging of my athletic ability and who I was as a person. And that's remained true all the way up to now when I speak to him occasionally. He was someone that had amazing impacts on my life and career. Also, McIntyre, he was a new coach who
Mhm.
came in to San Jose State, and he was wonderful. He was just a people person, just a good man, someone that you can count on, someone that pushed you to be your best. He was someone that encouraged excellence, and not just on the field, but just off the field as a man. Right, everything was a life lesson about who we were going to become. After football was all said and done, and he was someone I had an opportunity to reconnect with last year at San Jose State's homecoming. So it was wonderful to see him. And, at that point, 12 years had passed by, and I was able to speak to him about some of the accomplishments that I made over the years that we talked about that I was having, troubles with when I was younger, right? I was a little bit of a knucklehead when I was younger. Like I said, I was undisciplined in a lot of ways, and he would get so frustrated because he saw so much potential. And so to be able to see him and say, "Hey, coach, I did that. I did this. I accomplished that. I understood what you were saying back then was really rewarding. So he was somebody that was very special to me. And my one of my CFL coaches, Ryan Dimwitty, he's the head coach of the Toronto Argonauts right now, and he's someone that was a friend, a mentor, and a great coach, and just have a lot of respect for him. And again, he was just all about family. He was all about being the best you could possibly be, and those are people that really helped me navigate my career.
Dude, I love that. And thank you for sharing. When you were sharing about Coach McIntyre at San Jose State, you stated that he helped show you how to be a man, taught
Mhm.
you how to be a man, to grow up, stand in that level of maturity. I'm curious now that you have the benefit of hindsight, looking back, you're past your playing days, but you're also a husband and a father.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, in this season of your life, what does it mean to you to be a man? And what does it mean to show up as a man?
You know, this is this is a good one. I have this conversation a lot. And you may remember Clayton Gorey. That's one of my best
Mhm.
friends, and he's actually on the East Coast also. But we talk to each other a lot about this, and also it's really important, to show up as a man and show up as the father that you've always wanted to be for your child, and the husband for your wife, and but also trying to make sure that I make room for myself because I'm very much in the season of family. That's all I care about is growing my family, making sure that we're balanced, making sure that we're happy, making sure that we're comfortable. But sometimes I lose sight of some of those other things that I may personally have interest in terms of not saying that my family's taken away from that, but I feel like there's so much passion and energy that I can put out into the world. But I love my remote life and I love my family and I love being around them and just cultivating this environment. But I know that there's things that I can do as a man to elevate my family more if I get myself back out there, if I have more conversations, if I connect with more people. And to me, that's my responsibility and duties as a man is to not only provide a great lifestyle for my family, but take the trash outside every Thursday, right? Make sure that the pool's
Yeah.
clean in the backyard. You know what I mean? Make sure that my wife has breakfast or her coffee in the morning. Make sure that my daughter feels supported and feels seen and can walk into my office whenever she wants to and scream daddy. Those are the things that are really important to me right now. And I'm very much in a space where, that's my life. And there's nothing that will alter that, right? That can throw off that balance. You know how it is, Stu, and
Yeah. Yeah.
you're with your family. I mean, that passion and love that you feel from them every day, inspires you to do what you do every day and to continue to build and to continue to grow. To me, being that kind of a man is a standard. And Clayton said something very special to me the other day. And I'm like, dang, I feel like there's more things that I can be doing. There's more opportunities that I can go after and things like that. And he said something to me, and I think this also stands true for you. He says, who you are as a person, who you are as a father, a husband, the things that you want are a byproduct of who you already are. So those things are going to happen for you just based off what you're doing and how you present yourself and how you represent yourself. And that really struck a chord with me because he's right. Our focus should be building our family. Our focus should be maintaining the love within our home. Our focus should be making sure our family is happy, healthy, and full, right? And everything
Mhm.
else comes, and that's just part of it because you're doing the work, subconsciously just to make sure that your life is continuing to move forward. So I don't know. I just feel like being a man is being there for your family.
Dude, oh, we are so aligned on this viewpoint for sure. Yeah, it's funny, like people that I connect with, like trying to get them on this show or just out in the world ask me like what it's like being a dad, what it's like being a husband. And honestly, like it's the best two roles I've ever taken on in my life. I
Yeah,
am the most fulfilled pouring into my family.
yeah,
And I admittedly struggle a little bit with pouring so much into my family that I sometimes forget to take care of myself. Like I'm the guy that's going to miss a day at the gym
yeah.
if it means, taking care of my family. You kind of alluded to it, but how do you strike that balance for yourself so that you're pouring enough into yourself so you can pour into the ladies in your life?
Yeah, and you know what? And I think what I realized is that everything doesn't have to be separate, right? I used to think fitness for me needed to be something that I went and did on my own and, went out to the gym or went to the field and ran and things like that. But like I said, my family is important to me. My wife and I, we got a membership to this great new gym in Walnut Creek, and, we make that a part of our lives, right? That's part of our structure. That's part of our balance is to go together and, whether it be the sauna or the hot tub or cold tub or getting a workout in the gym, we do that together. And Michelle's mom, she's here with Sage, and she provides us that space to do that, which is so incredible because we have such an amazing unit here. It's hard for me to even express how wonderful this space is and this time is in my life, in our lives right now, just because we have this amazing partnership, and we work as a team, work as a unit, meaning myself, Michelle, and her mom, Patricia. And so it's us carving that time out and all supporting each other and putting ourselves in a position where we can all thrive and be healthy and be physically fit and be, mentally in shape and aware of certain things by helping each other and giving each other that time and space to say, okay, it's time to take care of self. It's time to take care of your mental health. Maybe you want to relax today. I'll take more on the stage, or let's put her in this activity so we can all free up a little bit of time. And it's just amazing to see these things come into life, man. It's also really amazing too to hear my daughter switching from English to Spanish. This little
Oh,
brown
it's
girl,
amazing.
right? So Michelle's mother, Patricia, she's from Nicaragua. And Sage calls her abuelita or Lita, abuela. And it's amazing to see her, taking on these challenges and blossoming, right? And I'm just very proud of my family, right? Sage just started a Spanish immersion preschool. And, these are things that we dreamed of, that we talked about as 19, 20-year-old kids, Michelle and I, and we're literally living those dreams right now and picking our daughter up from preschool. Like to me, that's like, we're so rich right now. It's like, it's a blessing, right? So for me, we're about balance, we're about communication, and we're just about giving each other grace. And so things have been really cool, man.
It sounds like you are providing your daughter all the opportunities that you probably wish you had growing up.
Yeah.
Are there ever any limits you feel like you need to put on pouring into your child?
No, I mean, I'll pour into her as much as she wants to be poured into, you know. And the thing is, she pours into me just as much. She
Yeah.
pours into myself and Michelle just as much. Like, yeah, people always say, hey, you shouldn't let your baby sleep in the bed with you. I'm like, I don't care. You sleep in this bed as much as you want to, right? You feel safe with us, right? You're not going to be in that bed with us forever, right?
Mhm.
We'll put her down for bed, and she'll sleep for an hour or two, right? And then, we hear our bedroom door open and she crawls in between us, and I'm okay with that because it's love, right? And it only happens for such a small time. And people say, oh, the course of, 5 to 6 years, at some point you can say, okay, hey, mom, I want to close my bedroom door, dad, I'm hanging out with my friends, X, Y,
Mhm.
Z. So I soak in all those little moments, and, I pour into her as much as I possibly can. And I also pour into her mom, right? I want her to see that her mom is so immensely loved and
Mhm.
valued, right? And the fact that she gets to see me kiss her mom before she goes to sleep when she's laying in between us. We watch Sage a lot, and when Michelle and I are talking, Sage is looking at me, she's looking at her mom, looking at me, and she's watching all those interactions, right? And so that's natural, right? That's something that she'll see and that she'll witness, and that that'll become part of her because that's what she sees every day. So to me, it's just like sports, it's repetition, right? And it's
Mhm.
it's good repetition, and I hope that she continues to pick up as much of it as she possibly can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if she takes after you at all, she'll be, if nothing else, a track star before we know it. It's amazing you share all that because I didn't get to be a part of my stepson's life for the super early years. I entered his life when he was 7, and he continues to be my biggest teacher, my biggest challenge, but also like one of my greatest sources of joy. I am so grateful my wife Jennifer deemed me worthy enough to be his bonus dad. He recently discovered Harry Potter, and the Harry Potter nerd in me has just been like loving every second of that, trying to explain all the movies to him. He just read the first book by himself, and just watching them become little versions of us, like being molded by the time with us, is really beautiful to see. And I think you hit on something really important. I work very hard to make sure that he knows how to treat women.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am very affectionate towards his mom, not in a weird way, obviously, but and I'm also a stickler on manners and how he talks to people. I'm curious as it relates to Sage. Are you already the protective dad? I know you're several years out, but
Yeah.
how do you see that coming down the pipe for yourself?
I think I'm protective in some ways, but like I'm a people person still. I've always been. I love
Yeah.
people. And so does Sage. She absolutely loves people. And I think it's a great asset, and it can also be something that'll hurt you sometimes as well. And
Mhm.
I think if you gain a great sense of people and understand who has good intentions, you'll be okay. And I hope that that's a skill that she has. I feel like I certainly had that skill. I can say, okay, this is not someone I want to associate myself with. This is
Mhm.
not someone that has good intentions. So I'll move on from this person. But I don't see myself as the type of father and man to put a boy down that has interest in my daughter. I'm not saying, hey, you know what,
Mhm.
my daughter's here for the taking. But I remember being that little kid and like, oh my God, I like your daughter, I would hate for a man to come across as just so brash and so rude. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe for all you know, I don't have a father in my life, right? And so I'm getting a representation of a man who's mean, who's angry, who's not open to communicating. And so I'm also looking at that in a sense as well. And so for me, right, I'm happy to have a conversation. I'm happy to say, yeah, you can come over and hang out and play, so long as you're respectful. You setting those
Sure.
particular boundaries, right? I also want my daughter to feel comfortable enough to say, hey, mom, dad, I want to be able to bring my friends over. I want to bring my boyfriend over. I'd rather them be under my roof where I know that, I can walk right downstairs or, I can open that door. I don't want it to be so secretive. And I think if you create that kind of environment where we're open and we're honest and we can communicate, I think it will lead to a more successful environment for everyone.
Yeah, and you're also able to affect mentorship as well for them
Yeah.
by proxy.
Exactly. I think that's important, right? You think about the amount of men that we've encountered in our lives through sports and things like that. Some have been open, some have been welcoming, some have been warm, and some have been completely closed off,
Mhm.
right? Not knowing who I am as a person, what I'm dealing with as a child, or maybe just for that moment, I needed the advice of a man, right? I needed someone that showed that they cared, that they were open, right? And I think that's another, major blessing in my life. I had a lot of wonderful men that were happy to pour into me, not because I necessarily needed it, because they just felt, that okay, you know what, I can communicate with this kid. I can talk to this kid about, whatever. And I've always had an older soul. Is how I felt,
Mhm.
and it's always led me to great, older men that spoke wisdom into me and spoke courage into me, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, my parents listen to every single episode. They still talk about the time you just came up to them on the middle of the basketball tournament and introduced yourself and had a whole conversation with them about, how they were enjoying the tournament for 10 minutes or so. So in that regard, man, like you never know the impression you're making on people just by connecting authentically and being who you are.
Yeah.
I want to switch gears a little bit just to make sure we're talking about what you're up to now. You have started your own company called The Trennd. And
Yeah.
for those of y'all listening, it's The Trennd with two N's.
Mhm.
And I could describe it, but I'm gonna botch it compared to how well you can be. So I'd love for you to tell the audience what you're up to, what it's about, and how you serve people.
I'll give you the idea about the trend. The trend, by definition, means to move in a direction of development and change. And that's what we're all trying to do. We're all trying to grow. We're all trying to change. We're all trying to be different at some point in stage in our lives. So one of the things for me is like I didn't grow up with a lot, right? But I've never really wanted or needed for anything. Um, Fashion for me, it became something I really enjoyed because my mom would do our annual school shopping, and she didn't have the most money in the world. So what she would do is she would buy us, our two pairs of jeans, our couple of shirts, and a pair of shoes. And I always miss and matched all those pieces with things that I had from the previous years, right?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of became my love for like fashion. I'll make a great outfit out of these jeans that I got 2 seasons ago, with this shirt that I got this year, and these shoes that I got 2 years ago. And I also used to grab clothes out of lost and found. Like, oh, this is a nice Nike sweatshirt. I could wash this, do this. These are a pair of Nike shoes. I could put these together with this. And so for me, I used to just try to collect different things and mix and match them. And I felt confident in what I was wearing, based off just who I was as a person, right? So the whole idea behind the trend was to help men be comfortable in their own skin, right? My idea was to create very basic looks for folks and create style guides that allow folks to be more efficient, right? You wake up in the morning, you look at your style guide, and you put a blue jean, white t-shirt on, brown belt, and a brown shoe. It's laid out right there for you, right? And I can show you 6 different ways to pair that with a jacket, with a blazer, with a hoodie, whatever the case may be. And so that was something that I started during my time when I was getting ready to retire from football. And so to switch gears a little bit, so I retired football from the CFL in February 2021, and I launched the Trennd in January. I think it was January 2022. So what a lot of folks got was a rushed version of the Trennd, right? For me, this was a very vulnerable time for me. Like, I've been playing football since I was a kid, and I'm like, I have to have something happen. I have to have something going on for myself. So I wanted to crank this out and say, okay, you know what? I'm transitioning because I have this going on. And really, I've slowed down the trend for that reason, because I want to be able to provide real value to people, right? My business model is not about, oh, I need to just make so much money. It's about adding actual value. And the reality is, it's not just about putting some clothes on your back. That won't make you feel good if you're not dealing with the deeper issues that you have with yourself. And so I'm currently actually going through an intensive program that I've created for myself that I'll provide to folks through the Trennd, probably at the end of 2024 or early 2025. So I want to make sure that I'm putting myself through that program. I'm putting myself through this intensive self-care process and learning things that I need to learn about myself so I can then serve others properly, right? So the Trennd will be relaunching later this year or early 2025, but it will provide more value. It will provide more clarity, and it'll allow people to get out of their own way, because typically we're our biggest blockers. And I want to make sure that I'm providing those services in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that, B. And folks, we'll make sure that all of B's contact info and also some more info on the Trennd is made readily available in the show notes and in the comment sections wherever you find this episode. You brought it up. How do you feel like people most often get in their own way from what they want to create with their lives?
Well, I mean, I think most folks have a perception of who they are and who they believe they should be. And
Mhm.
most times you're not supposed to be that person. That's the reality. Most times, like, you're not supposed to be a superstar athlete or a superstar singer or a movie star. You're supposed to be a regular person that has a regular family and that's doing regular things. And those things are so fantastic, if
Mhm.
you allow them to be, right? But sometimes we get in our way. Well, I should be doing this. I should be doing that, or this and that. And we don't take time to actually appreciate the moments that we're in. Like I tell you, Stu, I really take time every day to appreciate the current moment I'm in. I'm just so in bliss, right? And sometimes, like I said, sometimes I'm so caught up in this bliss that I'm like, oh well, I better get back to work, right? Because I can't be too comfortable. Because I know I'm happy, but you still want to have your foot on the gas a little bit, right? And
Mhm.
and that's really important. But I think, like I said, it's about taking care of yourself physically first, right? You have to have the energy and the stamina to be able to do things, to be able to want to get up and do things around your house, or go on a walk with the family, or cook dinner in the kitchen. If you're not physically in any kind of a shape, you're going to be tired all the time. You're going to be sluggish, right? You have to take time to meditate and be at peace with who you are and where you are in your life, right? You also have to be able to deal with the failures that you know that you've had over the years, right? It's okay. People are going to fail sometimes. You're not going to always be perfect at everything, but you have to be able to say, I'm okay with that. I'm okay that that was a season in my life. I've 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 understood it, I've processed it, and now I've released it and I let it
Hmm.
go so that I can move forward. And I think when you're able to do that, it allows you to get to the next step. It allows you to get to the next level. It allows new doors to open. Because what's the purpose of a new door coming if you haven't dealt with the stuff in the old door,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
It's like there's no way that you can possibly get through carrying all these bags that are too big to fit through the door. You know what I mean? So at some point you got to release some of these things so that you can move forward. And that's something that I really have worked on over the last couple of years, because I had so many regrets when I played ball. So many times I would, rewatch videos of a run that I got hit in the leg and I would fall and I would just beat myself up about it. And I remember I was showing a video to Michelle. And I'm like, dang, babe, if I would have just picked my leg up a little bit, I would have scored 2 touchdowns that game instead of one. And she's like, babe, you don't even play anymore. Why are you still going over this? Right. But sometimes you can be so critical of yourself. You can be so hard on yourself for things for no reason. And in the overall scheme of things, don't matter. My wife
Mhm.
loves me. My daughter adores me, and I'm in a good space. And sometimes you have to be okay with where you are and accept where you are, whether you're exactly where you want to be or not. You have to be able to accept your current space and status and work to move forward.
I'm curious. So you obviously are on the other side of your playing career. You've sounds like you've done a lot of the work to get yourself grounded where you are and what you're up to currently. Do former players or players about to transition out of the sport, do they reach out to you for this type of support already, or is this what you're looking to get into with the trend?
I mean, I talk to some folks occasionally, but it's definitely going to be a sector of the business where I can, speak to some athletes, because the reality is, Stu, I went through a phase of mourning, and
Sure.
I don't think people really talk about that or accept that. But I mourned the loss of something that I had for so long, and I didn't realize I was going through that until probably like a year ago. I told Michelle, I said, "Babe, I was just mourning the loss of the game." Actually, it wasn't a year ago. I went to Toronto from one of my best friends' bachelor party, and I was able to go to the facility where my old running backs coach was, and I was able to hear the players chatter in the locker room. I was able to watch film with the team for a little bit. I was able to walk out to the practice field and watch people do exactly what I used to do, and see them in their space and in their time. And the reality is, like, I think about it. I came into the league in 2012. It's 2023. Like, I should. It's my time is done. Like, my era of players aren't there anymore. And the ones that are there, I was looking and thinking to myself, I'm in a new phase of my life, career, and and I did that in my early 30s. Right now, I'm going to be 30, turning 35 in April, but I've had 4 to 5 years to really transition.
Mhm.
And like, these guys are 35, 36, and they still have to transition afterwards.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And so it really gave me a lot of closure to go back out there. And it was emotional. It was an emotional time for me, just because I hadn't been up there. COVID had happened and the world had changed so much. So
Sure.
I was like, I got to transition and get my life going back here at home. But to go back there and to experience that again was it was nostalgic, right? And
Yeah.
it's a unbelievable feeling. But I knew that it just affirmed that I was ready to be done and that I no longer needed that. And I was happy with my accomplishments, and that was my last bit of mourning,
Mhm.
for the game. Now I'm just a fan. I look forward to watching it. I look forward to
Good.
seeing players make plays and things like that. But you have to accept that when that's done for you, it doesn't make me any less of an athlete. I did great things when I played, and I still train myself. Not saying that I'm going to go out on the field and play anymore, but I know that my time was special there, and it's okay to move on and put that side, not say that erase that side of me, but say that I've accomplished that. I did that. I did
Mhm.
that for many, many years, and that part of my life is done in terms of me being an athlete. But I'll always be that person. It'll always be part of me, and then it'll allow me to really thrive in the next phase of my career. Because if you don't mourn, and if you don't accept that, it's very hard to do anything else. You know.
Yeah, no, and I hear you. I worked in the business side of sports for about 6 years after college, and very similar. Obviously, I wasn't on the field, but I did tie my entire identity to being Stu the sports guy. Like, I made it to the New York Yankees, also worked for the Atlanta Braves, and had a pretty rough exit from the baseball industry just because it was such a high stress environment. I literally ended up in the hospital from the stress because I didn't know how to manage that at the time. And I'm curious because I definitely went through a mourning process as well. Would love your perspective. As men, I feel like we're just told to suck it up and deal with it by society a lot of the time. And for you as an athlete, a subset of the population, I think that really gets put up on a pedestal. Do you feel like it's harder for people in your position to give themselves the space to mourn the end of an identity like that?
I think it's tough, and I think it's tough because you're so highly praised for doing something like that. You're so highly praised for being a pro athlete, right? Not just by fans and things, but by women,
Mhm.
and all sorts of other entities, right? And I think that when you're going through that process and you're letting go of that side of yourself, a lot of your identity and all of your confidence was attached to being a football player or basketball player or baseball player or whatever the case may be, right? And I don't even think this is just, an athlete's issue. It's an issue for anyone in a great career, right? When you've spent so much time becoming who you believe you are, whether it be a news anchor, a sports broadcaster, someone, a tech mogul, whatever the case may be. When you've attached your identity to that, and it's been stripped away from you, you know, whether you're ready or not, it's a hard thing to deal with, right? But you have to face it head on. You have to deal with it so that you can move forward. It's hard to accept the beauty of other opportunities if you're so stuck on, well, but this experience was like this. So my
Mhm.
expectation is this. Everything's not going to be the same, but there's beauty in so many other opportunities and so many other spaces that you have to start to release yourself of that burden. Because the reality is, too, nobody really cares, right?
Yeah.
Unless you were just a superstar, no one really cares, right? No one
Mhm.
cares that that you ran for 250 yards and had 3 touchdowns, 10 years ago. That's great. It was a great
Mhm.
accomplishment. People probably enjoy it when they saw it, but people are eating dinner with their family. People are trying
Yeah.
to go on vacation with their families and hanging out with their friends and building their relationships and things of that nature, right? And I think that we have to, let those things go so that we can move forward. And it's hard work, and it takes a vulnerable person, not an ego driven person, right? You got to get your ego out of the way as well, and just accept what is. And when you can do
Yeah.
that, I really do think you get to the other side of things. You just find peace.
Oh, I feel like we could keep going, but we're going to need to bring this to a close here pretty quickly. I do want to squeak this one question in, though. You have shared a couple of times in this conversation that primarily through your family, you are blessed to experience a lot of bliss
Hmm.
in this current season of your life. For those moments that are maybe not as blissful,
Hmm.
what currently works for you to bring yourself back to that state?
Michelle and her mom says it's a lot, right? Like, I try to stay pretty even kill with
Mhm.
things. right? I try not to overwhelm myself and stress, and I attest a lot of that to sports, right? Just that high pressure environment. You have to remain calm. You have to be able to make rational decisions and things of that nature. Everything's not going to be perfect. I completely understand that, but it's part of the process, right? I've really started to realize that, failure is part of the process. Adversity is part of the process, and you have to be able to deal with it and deal with it head on, right? You have to deal with it, in a rational manner. You have to really communicate and talk about why X, Y, and Z didn't happen, why X, Y, and Z fell through, why X, Y, and Z did this and that, right? I think if you can communicate about it and you can talk about it with your spouse, with your family, it'll make the blow, it'll lessen the blow, I should say, right? But
Yeah.
you can avoid it. Everything's not going to always be hunky dory and perfect, but you deal with it as it comes and you deal with it head on, and you work together. I was a part of the major tech layoffs, right? I was working at Meta last year for a bit,
Mhm.
right? I'm like, wow, I'm retired. I got a great tech job, and I got laid off a year later, right?
Yep.
And so again, it's like it's one of those things, adversity. I was upset at first, but I'm like, you know what? I have to figure out something else, right? This is just a part of the journey. I've been cut more times than I can imagine, and this is another part of that. And now it's time to transition to something else, to put myself in a better position, to put myself in a more stable position. And you work with your team to figure out what that is. And it's obviously easier said than done, but it takes real work. But you have to just be willing to do the work, right, Stu? And
Mhm.
I'm willing and able to do the work because I know that it will not only benefit me, but it'll benefit my family.
Yeah. And from everything we've learned today, it all comes back to family.
Absolutely. I mean, that's it. That's it. That's all it is right now. If you focus on building your family, everything else will fall into place.
Brandon, thank you so much for being on today. Got one last question for you, but before I ask that, folks, if you got any type of value out of today's conversation, which I know you did, please like, please subscribe, please share this out with somebody. Helps these conversations get out to more people, help folks like Brandon have a bigger impact in the world, especially for the launch of the Trennd coming down the pipe. Brandon, this is a question I ask every guest I have on this show as we prepare to sign out. What are you acknowledging yourself for today?
To be honest with you, I'm not acknowledging myself. I'm acknowledging you. I'm appreciative of this platform that you're creating for people to share their opinion, to share their voice, right? And I think that's a skill that you've always had, and it's really cool to see that you're pouring into yourself and you're pouring into others. So I appreciate you for doing that, and giving me this space to speak and giving us an opportunity to reconnect, because I can assure you this won't be the last time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we'll definitely not only have to have you on the show again in the future, but definitely going to hit you up next time I'm out in the Bay Area for sure. And folks, those of you that listen today, this is your inside track to success. We will catch you next week with another inspiring guest or message to help you up level your life. See you then.